Hello folks, thanks for joining me. This is Paragon RG. We're going to take a look at what this upcoming patch has to offer. Now, this patch was announced yesterday, which is February the 7th, I believe. Am I getting my dates right? Yeah, February the 7th. And I believe it's released February 8th. So, very quick turnaround on that. They didn't give us a week notice like they have previously. Now, this is a patch. It's not considered an update. So, in theory, it is on the smaller side. Just keep in mind any replays will not be usable. So that's part of why I jumped on to cover some replays while I could before all of the existing replays were no longer of use. So big announcement right off the top. Animation canceling. We've made improvements to those issues. So we'll have to see if this actually fixes the issue or not. But keep in mind, what the top level meta had become was something like produce a ton of lancers, and then when you get in combat, you move, attack, and then they would actually swing faster. They get about a 33% DPS boost for doing that. And to be honest, it's just really annoying for players having to do. And so I think a lot of high level players were really quite sick of this. So apparently this is fixed. We'll have to keep an eye on how fixed it is, let's say. In some cases, I guess palisade walls could not be targeted. Don't think I noticed that one. Trebuchets now deal area of effect damage when missing their intended target. So this is pretty cool. Now, I think maybe the devil is in the details here. Like, does this mean that... I assumed this meant... well, okay, I guess if they shoot at a unit, like not a building, then if they miss... well, if they hit, then that's great. If they miss, then they do area of effect and maybe kill more stuff. But does that mean if they hit a unit dead on, they don't do area of effect? Or if they hit where they intended but the unit moved, they don't do area of effect? So not exactly sure what this means, but we'll have to see. This should actually be a nice benefit to trebuchets. And then the English civs, shattering projectiles, should be pretty powerful, which improves the area of effect for trebuchet damage. So incendiary ships were getting extra damage range after getting the explosive tech. That has been fixed. In some cases, they were exploding 2 or even more times, which was how you'd see a single demo ship do 2,000 damage to a stone wall, which is completely ludicrous. So this has been damaged. Damaged, nerfed, fixed. They have increased the explosion damage to 400 to account for that. So now that it's not bugged, hopefully 400 damage is reasonable. This is not a small change coming up here. Scout cost increased from 60 to 70 food. So this is a big deal because scouts are currently produced in pretty significant numbers. Now, it's a little less major given that the scout meta isn't quite in favor, given that the professional scouts doesn't work quite as well as it used to. But scouts are still being used to mass as meat shields, and this will mean that it's a little more difficult to do that. So we'll have to see how that plays out. And of course, your original scout is just as good as it used to be, although actually a little less good, considering that without animation canceling, it won't be able to kill villagers nearly as quickly. On to fishing. So, shorefish harvest rate has been reduced. This is about 13%, I believe, when I checked. And the amount of shorefish has halved in each given deposit. Similar change to the fishing ships, I guess 11% reduction, and halved also the each deposit, how many fish are there. So what this means is, for example, if you're playing an islands map and someone's fishing, well, they're going to have to head out to deep sea quite a bit more often to get their fish. Additionally, in a map like Black Forest, your fish will run out a lot sooner. So it won't make sense to make as many ships. And we may even see some builds that don't go for fish at all. Also, on rivers, I think this is going to be a huge deal. Hopefully, we'll see more builds that don't make use of fish. But if you do, you can get some advantage from doing so. So, pretty significant change made to fishing overall. We'll see how that affects the game as a whole. Siege, this is an odd one. So people had noticed when your units sort of if they're in a formation, like they're together, you click to move them. Sometimes units that are a little farther out will almost like wheel to catch up and they move extra quickly. Well, apparently, this is almost a bug where it's supposed to be 40% for other units, but for Siege, it was 100%. And so their speed was doubling when they did this, which made them really hard to catch, especially when they're grouped with other units. So that's been fixed. I think all cavalry, all melee cavalry, so horsemen, camel riders, fire lancer, and knights, I guess everyone but scouts, their bonus torch damage is now increased from 10 to plus 20. So what this means is that's the base damage. So early on in the game, that will make them not twice as good. They'll do their base torch damage plus the bonus damage. So they'll do like 30 instead of 20. As the game goes on, you get more damage from your torch damage anyway. So this amounts to probably more like a 25% increase. So it's not the double damage like that it looks, but nevertheless, this will still help with killing siege units. Also important, I'm just going to jump here for a minute. Siege move speed has been decreased in different ways. You can see the list here. So generally, it should be easier to catch up to siege anyway. And then when you do that with cavalry, which is already easy because they're faster, they'll do more damage. So major change to siege there. It should be much less frustrating, hopefully, to kill siege from here on out. Bombard health has been reduced from 480 to 400. Much needed in my opinion. And siege weapons now also deal their bonus damage versus ships. This is actually pretty wild. So keep in mind, Springles were useful against ships back when they did 60 damage plus 20 against siege. So just 60 against ships. But now they do 30 plus 90 against siege. So 120. And apparently now they'll be doing that against ships as well. So Springles are going to be absolute beasts against ships. Which means that in the Castle Age, if you do lose your water, one way to get back on would be add a couple of Springles and add a dock. Now, I'm not sure how the range works there, if the Springles will be able to range units that are shooting at the dock. But I think this is going to have a big role in maps, like river maps, things like that. So I think what we're seeing with the strong naval play on rivers is effectively coming to an end. There are very strong counters to Navy now when they're close to land units. And think of bombards. Bombards are going to be doing something like 600 plus damage to ships, and Royal Culverins are going to do like 900 damage to ships, something like that. So they'll absolutely rip through them. Okay, so moving on to Civ specific changes. Let's go down here. Abbasid Dynasty, age up time has been reduced. I think this is nice. They always had some bonus in that they didn't have villagers needed to do the age up, but if you actually work it out, it never really amounted to that many resources. So I think this is quite nice. This will give them that much more tempo going into feudal and castle age and so on, and make them a little harder to actually catch up with. I can imagine seeing some second TCs going down 15 seconds earlier, just being that much harder to catch up with. To both Abbasid and Delhi, so I guess our Muslim civs, they have increased the explosive Dow detonation range. I think this must have been a bug, because the range 1 instead of 2 was just awful, and people noticed that. People knew they had terrible demos. So that's been increased to match the others. And Dow's now increased, their damage has been increased to match the others. So their ships were frankly horrible, and this should help them to catch up. Moving on, their berry harvest bonus has been increased from 25 to 30, and berry carry capacity from 10 to 13. So carry capacity helps, for those of you that don't know, in general efficiency, because all the walking time, especially with berries, as you eat the closer berries, you start having to walk to the farther berries, and that actually eats quite a bit of time. And so this kind of thing makes them much more efficient. So yeah, their early game should actually be faster here. So they're actually going to go through their berries even more quickly, and I expect some pretty fast feudal times, especially out of the Abbasid dynasty. Actually, no, especially out of the out of the Delhi, Abbasid are still limited in that they can't speed up the age up time, but they should have some really efficient feudal age times. Chinese clock tower bombard health reduced from 720 to 600. Honestly, I know people are saying you shouldn't have nerfed China because they're not doing that well. Their bombards were completely ridiculous. So this will hopefully allow the devs to get a closer look at how to actually improve China as a whole, because they probably don't even know what to buff right now because China is such a sort of one trick pony. And the Imperial official cannot be used to supervise landmarks because what people were doing is they would supervise the astronomical clock tower, triple produce, let's say springolds or bombards is the more annoying problem once you get Imperial. That was pretty difficult to deal with. And the reload time bonus you'd get from reload trills was actually pretty wild. I only realized this fairly recently. Remember that a 33% bonus, like a 33% reduction in a time, amounts to a 50% bonus, right? So for every, let's say every 2 shots you make with a bombard, if I have this tech, I'm making 3 shots. That is a huge difference. And even just getting that second shot first already matters quite a bit. So this brings it down a little bit. And apparently SCPs weren't damaging ships before, so kind of an odd thing here. Imperial officials' tax collection cooldown sometimes did trigger, so there was some bug there. HRE. Prelate move speed has been increased. I think I misread this the first time. I thought it was 1.1 to 1.12, and that's pretty trivial, but a 12% bonus in movement speed is no joke. And they're hoping they'll move them with armies more often now. And their Inspire cast range is a little bigger, so hopefully a little less micro needed within a base to keep them inspiring your units, or if they're in the middle of a tree area where they're all being chopped, hopefully they can still reach all of them to inspire all of them efficiently. Mongols, this is probably the change I'm least happy with. Mongols need to be nerfed, but I feel like this wasn't the way. So the raid bonus has been adjusted. So the base level used to get 50 food and 50 gold when you destroyed, or sorry, burned a building. So it was in the burning stage, quarter health or less. That's been changed from 50 to 25. Maybe this makes sense. And now it's kind of like a minor passive thing. I think it's maybe harder to build around. I feel like you need to buff, or sorry, nerf Mongols in other ways. Like they shouldn't be an infantry civ. To me, that's the simplest thing. So why do deer stones affect infantry at all? They should probably just affect villagers, or maybe just rework deer stones entirely. Something like that. Towers have already been changed. I think there's a couple tweaks like that that would bring them in line. And basically, they shouldn't get bonuses to infantry. It should be like a bunch of bonuses to cavalry, and then we'll see some interesting cavalry Mongol play where they're torching buildings and hopefully making a bunch of bounty from that. But they're trying to stop a kind of snowball that Mongols were getting here. So anyway, that is the change they have chosen to make. The Rus, high armory, they've reduced the reload bonus time as well, similar to the Chinese unique tech. So I don't know how necessary this was. I know with Springolds, like Springolds with long range. Now, did fine-tuned guns only affect bombards? I'd have to actually check that. So I don't know how important this was. Rus have already been hit with nerfs recently, but it may be a reasonable change regardless. So in terms of what's next, I think they've talked a little more about this. We should expect some more Abbasid changes. I think there's going to be changes to camels coming up, which I'm really looking forward to. I know people didn't really ride camels in the medieval era in combat, but it's still super awesome. Like, I don't know why I love seeing it. I love seeing camels, elephants, things like that. So I would love to see camels get buffed and Abbasid step up as a proper anti-cavalry civ, not just a booming civ. So they're monitoring matchmaking. They're talking a little bit about the ranked seasons preview, which I guess went reasonably well. The problem was it was still on an older build in some ways. Oh, Streltsy? Stolen Turnip? Tells me Streltsy. Oh, okay. So Streltsy were shooting crazy fast with this. Yeah, Streltsy do hit a pretty wild power spike. Like at a medium level of play, someone gets a massive Streltsy. If you don't have Mangonels ready, like you're dead. Because even when they jump on Mangonels, they can just pretty much one hit them as a group and kill them. So pretty hard to deal with Streltsy. So maybe this brings them a little closer to be in line. I think something really important they've announced is that Age of Empires 4 will have a public update preview. So kind of like an active beta build, where when they're ready to, when they have a bunch of changes they want to test, they'll just put them into the public update preview. At which point you'll be able to, players who want to will be able to play on that. Now, one issue with this is that it does split the player base, but you have to assume most players won't want to be on it. That being said, if it splits the pro player base, it's a bit of a problem. So we'll have to see how this plays out. I think generally it's a positive thing because people can catch all the bugs if they want to, right? You don't have to be a part of it if you don't want to. And then they can release much more polished content. So hopefully the updates really keep flowing that way. And then they talk about some known issues. By the way, they did mention on Twitch stream they did that they are looking into the drop hack. I was hoping for a little more information on it. Honestly, I think it needs to be fixed yesterday. Hopefully at the latest, the spring update fixes the drop hack, but it's completely unreasonable for a game of this caliber to have a way to drop hack and get no results. At minimum, players need to be banned for doing it so that they stop doing it, or even just, their account paused for 2 weeks or something like that, enough to stop them from being a problem. Yeah, so I think that's pretty much it for the build. I'm still really excited for it. I think it is released today, February 8th. So stay tuned for that. We'll try to cast some games from top level players playing it right away. We'll get some fresh patch games. All right, folks, this has been Paragon OG. Hope you enjoyed this. Stay tuned, and I'll catch you next time.